Welcome to the Concerning Learning video podcast. In this episode, episode 2, we'll talk about how to align your learning strategy with the business. If you're having challenges with getting a seat at the table, the C-suite table, and keeping a seat at the table, this show is definitely for you. In addition, there are times when budgets are constrained and funds are limited, and if the talent development department is one of the first ones cut, definitely stay tuned for the remainder of this episode and learn some practical tips on how to address those issues. If you're looking for ways to find more credibility within your learning and development department, stay tuned. This session is for you. You are going to get some learning nuggets to help you with all of these challenges that you're experiencing within your learning department. Now it's time for Learning Revolution News. This is where I talk about trends that are happening within government, the nonprofit world, as well as the corporate world. Within the federal world, I'm sure you've heard about the proposed pay freeze for federal employees. This is important to those of us in the learning and development world because whether or not the pay freeze occurs or not, the damage has already been done to the employee morale, to the employee engagement. So these are opportunities for us to really capitalize on that and build a learning strategy, an extraordinary learning strategy that helps repairing some of the damage from this proposed pay freeze. On the nonprofit front, I was doing some research and I saw this organization called Build Change. They focus on repairing, rebuilding schools and houses after natural disasters. What intrigued me about this particular organization was they're using virtual reality to prepare and plan for their projects. Here's another opportunity for talent development to help them reskill those technical skills and help employees learn how to use new technologies in order to do everyday work. And on the corporate front, there was a Harvard Business report that revealed that millennials are not really satisfied with their leadership development opportunities. They cited 3 reasons why they're not satisfied with it. One was poor content. We know that the content in the leadership development programs are probably not necessarily targeted to millennials. So there's opportunities for improvement there. There was also not enough external thinking and expertise. Those are opportunities to align business strategies and learning strategies with how do we really tap into the talent that's already there and help the millennials develop in their leadership skills. And the third reason was there was no application on the job requirements. So we need to build more experiential learning into those leadership development programs for millennials. These are just a few trends that are happening within the learning and development world. I added a section called Deadra, Please Rescue My Training because I want to make more of a connection with you and really address your real world challenges as they pertain to learning strategy. So not too long ago, actually last month, I had a private screening of the first episode of this podcast. And there was a Q&A session where the audience was able to ask me questions. So I got some really good questions and I just wanted to share one of them with you and tell you my approach to how I would resolve that or address that issue. So the question was, how do you get management to see the importance of developing all employees and not just a select few? This is a challenge for organizations across the board, in all sectors, in all industries. This is a challenge. And it's challenging because it really negatively impacts employee engagement when only a few employees are seen as being the privileged ones to get those opportunities to develop. it really should be more of a transparent process. People need to know how to obtain those developmental opportunities across the board. Organizations need to adopt a more, I would say, broad approach to leadership, to develop leaders at all levels, because there are leaders at all levels and there's opportunities to develop everyone within an organization, and everyone deserves a chance to really succeed and maximize their potential and get that development that they need to perform at their best. So here's a bonus question. This one comes up all the time. I hear it wherever I go. I actually experienced it when I was working in the government. The question is, how do you get management to buy into learning and the value that learning provides? And I say that comes from being, I mentioned earlier that when budgets are cut, training is cut usually. That's one of the first things to go. And that sends a message that it's not valued. It's something that's extra. When in fact, all high-performing organizations have a robust learning and development program. And I can name them, anyone that you know of. There's the Googles, the Microsofts, Amazon. They all have robust and comprehensive development programs that touch every employee within the organization. So if you sell it to management and let them know that without this, I call it remedy selling, without us investing in our employees' development, we don't get their best. We're not going to be as productive, we're not going to be as efficient, and we're not going to be as effective in achieving the mission. So those are just a few ways to engage management and help them understand the value of learning. Now it's time for the best learning strategies. This is where I bring in a thought leader, an industry expert, or my mentor, Sardek Love, to talk about learning strategies and practical applications of learning strategies. So we like to talk about the different strategies and how we approach them. And so I just want to introduce Sardek Love, my mentor. He's an international speaker, keynote speaker, peak performance expert. He's trained, I will say, millions in at least 32 countries across the world. He is someone, my go-to person that helps me, and he'll give me a tip and I'll move forward with it, and then I look to him for feedback. And so he is someone that I am privileged and honored to have on today's episode in the Best Learning Strategies.
Well, I'm excited to be here with you, Deidre, and you know, this is so cool. So let's do this. Let's give some folks some good stuff, because I've been watching what you're doing. I'm excited for you. So it's hard for me to sit here and sit still.
Well, good. Well, we're going to have one of those conversations like we did when I first met you. I think I met you at an ATD Leaders Conference.
Wow.
Years ago.
Yeah, that was when we were like 20.
Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You were 20.
Uh-huh.
But I asked you is when I first learned how to tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what is this Twitter thing? And you were talking about your strategies, and I was like, you know what? That's one person I'm going to stay connected to in my journey, in my development. And so here we are.
Here we are. And
All
look
right.
at you. Look at you.
Thank you.
Oh, this is exciting. Your growth has been phenomenal. I mean, watching you grow from where you were in your previous role to now launching your company and now this podcast. This is personally rewarding, just to sit back and have a front row seat to what you're doing. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, go for it. Let's do
this.
this.
I really want our viewers to really get into the mind of Sardek in his learning strategy and some practical tips, which I know you don't mind sharing those practical tips. As long as people are action oriented and take them and do something with them, you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. That's the key. The difference, as you know so well, that for me, I'm happy to share as much as I can, but you got to do something with it, because it's a pipe dream if you're sitting there just thinking and not doing. So
absolutely,
yeah.
That's actually a learning strategy within itself.
It is.
And so I always preach about learning agility and how do you don't learn it just to learn it. You got to learn it to do something with it.
Right.
And then if it works, if it doesn't work, you adjust and then you do something else.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
So, how would you describe your unique learning your organizational learning strategy?
When it comes to looking at organizations and as a service provider, trying to help them as a partner, one of the things that makes me a little bit more unique is I do focus on, as a performance expert, a peak performance expert, I do really focus on what is it that you're going to do. There's a classic statement that says success requires attention and scheduling on your calendar. Nothing happens unless you do something. So those standard action plans that almost every training program and every people do at the end of every training class, we complete these action plans, those are completely worthless unless there's some action and accountability behind it. So I put the action into and behind the accountability, and that's not necessarily unique to the industry, but it is unique to those who get results.
Absolutely.
So I like to do that, and the concept is called implementation intention. So tell me what you're going to do, tell me when you're going to do it, schedule it, and then tell me when you did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As a new full-time entrepreneur, small business owner, my schedule, my calendar is like my livelihood. And so if you don't schedule it, you don't necessarily do it.
Exactly.
And so that's something that I do. I schedule learning on my calendar so that I don't forget.
Right. And leaders have to do that for themselves as well, and that's one of the things that leaders don't do so well. They get to a position oftentimes of destination in a position, and they forget to continue to develop because they don't feel like they have time. And that's when things start to go awry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to stay focused. Continual learning isn't optional.
Correct.
And that's something that I live by, I promote, and that's why we connected. You did an interview with ATD, and it was published in the TD magazine. I don't have the exact date, but you've probably done many. But this one, you were quoted as saying, "Weak leaders reward compliance, average leaders reward dependency, and great leaders who are innovative reward trying." What did you mean by that? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So when you think about that, weak leaders, they reward compliance. What I'm saying there is, think about all the leaders who you don't survive unless you do as they say, right? And that's a tough place to play in that sandbox. Then the other leaders, the average leaders, they reward dependency. They don't want you to make a decision without coming to them. But the truly innovative leaders are the ones who actually reward trying. See, they don't mind, and they understand that failure is a part of success and growth. And so they want you to try, and they celebrate, and they encourage you. Even if you make a mistake, they'll still encourage you because, if we think about it from a learning perspective, I always use the analogy, how many of you all have ever had the horrific experience, and I say that funny and jokingly, of teaching your teenager how to drive?
Oh my gosh,
Right?
I'm going through that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's life
Today
after
is
that.
her second day driving
Oh, yeah.
to school by herself.
Yeah.
So the first day, we trailed her.
Oh, yeah.
And so today she did it by herself.
Oh, ooh.
So
yeah, see?
you touched it. You got me.
Now, having said that, think about that experience that you're living right now, and almost all the adults out there will either have done it themselves with their kids or known of someone who's going through your exact experience. And why do we as leaders, I'm sure that when you're out there and you're working with your daughter, right? Okay, I'm sure you're encouraging her, even if she forgets to turn on a blinker or she merges incorrectly, you're still encouraging her. You're not beating her down.
Exactly.
Right? And that's the way learning works, right? Yeah. We reinforce the behaviors and give them encouragement. Somewhere along the way, weak leaders forget to do that, and they want that whole compliance thing. Average leaders tend to want, just imagine if she wouldn't go anywhere and wouldn't make any decisions without you in the car with her. How much burden is that on you as the leader?
Exactly.
Right? But some people love that stuff. but it keeps people tied up, right? And it keeps your talent unleashed. So the innovative leaders are the ones who are like we are as adults, who teach our children how to drive. We reward them so that they can become independent, make their own decisions, and get from destination to destination efficiently and successfully.
Yes.
That's what learning leaders and all leaders need to do. Unfortunately, most of us and most leaders aren't that way.
Exactly. Exactly. As a leader myself, and having been in leadership roles, you definitely have to allow people the opportunity to learn and take calculated risks and fail, because there's a lot of growth and a lot of learning in failure. I know every failure I've gone through, I've learned something, or else why did you go through it?
Exactly.
And then you're going to have to repeat it. And who wants to do that? Right. So I truly, get exactly what you're saying as far as being able to being comfortable. You have to trust. You have to impart trust in your leader, in your employees, so that they can do their best.
Indeed.
So I love that.
Yeah.
So as a learning strategy, how would you sum that up in a few sentences?
Simple. As a learning strategy, what I tell every learning leader and every leader in general is allow them to act, like you say, give them the opportunity, allow them to make a mistake, give them coaching feedback,
Yes.
and repeat. Give them a chance, another opportunity, because growth happens over time. Nothing happens without sufficient time.
Absolutely. I love it.
It's
I love
simple.
it. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Like, we get it.
Yeah, this is easy. However, most people, again, they get so caught up in the time, and I don't have time. My favorite saying is we never have time to do it right the first time, but we always find time, money, and resources to do it over and over and over
Exactly.
and over. And you know what? For learning leaders, that's the place of greatest opportunity.
Yep.
The things that have been done over and over and over,
Exactly.
because there's a problem that hasn't been solved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is actually where I was going with the next question. That's about, what is your advice for learning leaders and making sure that, so the topic is on alignment, business alignment. What can learning leaders do to ensure that they have business alignment with their learning strategy, but that they are adding value?
Okay, so this one is where I really get provocative with learning leaders in particular. Now, most learning leaders, most people who come into training, most of them are never started out their career as training professionals, right? I didn't either.
Yes,
right?
accidental trainer here.
Accidental trainer, fell into it, fell in love with it,
Yes.
right? So oftentimes we don't have that business background. What learning leaders need to do if they don't have it, and hear me now on this, because you're at a deficit if you don't have this, you have a disadvantage. Every manager who manages resources is held accountable to 4 variables: time, quality, cost, and output.
Yes.
It is that simple. Now, they may be variables that are shared in different ways from different angles based on dashboards, reports, whatever. But if a learning leader doesn't know what the variables that those managers that they serve, they don't know what those variables are in terms of what they're held accountable for: time, quality, cost, and output, the learning leader is blind, because they cannot speak to what matters to that manager that they're serving.
Right.
Because every manager wants it as fast as they can get it, time-wise, at the highest quality they can get it,
Yep.
at the lowest cost that they can get it, at the highest output that they can get it. Now, we know from a project management perspective, I gave you 4 variables. 3 of those are the triple constraints in project management. And we know that you and I know that they can only get 2 out of those 3 triple constraints at any given time. So learning leaders need to really first start understanding what are those variables that they are trying to positively impact for their stakeholders, and then align all of their actions, all of their services to help improve those metrics that matter to their stakeholders. And if they do that, they will have alignment, they'll get influence. They don't do that, they are a cost on the balance sheet.
Wow.
Simple.
Very simple.
Yeah.
4 things.
4 things.
Amazing. Amazing.
Life is not complicated. It's only complicated due to ignorance or lack of interest or just lack of action. One of those 3 things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now you see why he's my mentor.
She's all right. She's good.
So To be that trusted advisor, that business partner, a learning leader needs to be focused on business and know business. So they can't go to the CEO talking about Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. They need to speak the language of the business.
Yes.
And what matters in business.
In business speak.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Very simply, and they need to do one thing and become really good at doing one thing. Listen.
Okay.
I'll make it 2, because you got to ask a question.
Okay.
So you should ask questions.
Okay.
And then do the hardest thing that most learning leaders and most leaders have a hard time doing. Asking a question and then just listening.
Yes.
Because it's amazing what you can get when you start to ask your stakeholders, what's the problem? Where is it occurring? When did it begin? How big is it? You know, any of those types of questions. Or my favorite question. Here's the one question that I teach all learning leaders to ask.
Let me guess. No.
Go for it. You want to go for it?
No.
Yeah? Okay.
What keeps you up at night?
No, this is
Not that one.
That's the old
That's
version.
the old one. Okay, school me.
Okay. Here's the new version of what keeps you up at night. So if you're that leader that I'm serving, okay, you're in operations and something's going on in your operations and you're missing in terms of productivity.
Okay.
You know, I'm going to ask you, Deidre, what are the problems that you're experiencing right now that meet all 3 of these criteria? Number 1, I want to know the problems that are urgent, that you have, that are pervasive, meaning that it's impacting a lot of people or a lot of resources, and it's urgent, pervasive, and expensive if left unresolved. Because if you think about that, if you tell me all the problems that you have that are urgent, impacting a lot of people and or resources, and it's expensive if left unresolved, when I get those particular ones from you, those are the ones that you will find unbudgeted dollars for. Because if you don't resolve them, you might be out of a job pretty soon.
Absolutely.
That's what keeps you up at night. So I don't want to know all your problems.
Right.
I just want to know the ones that are urgent,
Right.
impacting a lot of people or resources, and expensive if left unresolved, because you will do anything to get those resolved. And what you'll find oftentimes is it's really not going to be more than 3.
Yep.
They'll identify the 1, the 2, or 3 things that they're constantly being hounded about, they're constantly having a challenge with. And then if you can be a solution provider to any of those problems, you gain instant credibility. You become their go-to person. They will not make a decision without having you in the room at the point of decision and before.
Wow.
But there's one thing you got to do in order to get to that question and get a real answer. It's the T word. You have to have trust between you and that leader. And that doesn't mean you just provide training to them. No, you got to go and spend time with them. You got to get to know them. You might need to know things about them that they wouldn't even necessarily tell you. And how do you do that? You go out and just find out what's going on in their life. What are the hobbies they like? Everybody who knows me knows that Saturdays are reserved for Virginia Tech football.
Yes.
And all you got to do to get in my world of orbit is say anything positive about Virginia Tech. We're buddies.
All right.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that.
Yeah, you know that.
I do. What do you want to leave our viewers and our listeners with?
I think the number one thing that I can share with the listeners to your podcast and the viewers of this podcast, especially if they're in the learning space and leading those learning spaces, listen, the operations, sales, and all the other parts of your organization, they want results. Your trainers are not just trainers, and you are not just a training manager. You are truly there to help improve performance and get results. If you come with a results focus, you will gain influence and credibility. If you come with a task focus, like I train, I cover this, I do that, butts and seats, you will find yourself at some point in competition with someone like me. And although I always go in and work with organizations, the training parts of the organization, because I'm never a threat, I'm a support.
Right.
But that's not always the case with other providers in this space. So if you want to add value, do it from a results-based focus and not a task-based focus or a cost-based focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think all trainers need to have that performance consulting mindset going in,
because there's always other contributors to why things are not working well.
Exactly.
So you need to not be so focused on just the training event, but how can we improve the organizational performance?
Exactly. I mean, I would say this, like, for you, an analogy I always use on focusing on a training event is like focusing on the plane when it flies. But there's a lot that goes on to get that plane prepared before takeoff, up and then back down safely. So if we're just focused on the event, we're just focused on it flying, and that's a bad place to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening and watching the Concerning Learning video podcast. And how can people connect with you?
So if you're in the learning space or you want to reach out to me, connect with me, I'm on every social media channel, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under my name, Sardek Love.
All right.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find all of my social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, from www.rescuemytraining.com. Thank you, Sardek.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Now it's time for Dedra's Learning Nugget. This is where I get to share my expertise and give you some practical tips and resources in order to really make connections and build an extraordinary learning strategy. In the first episode, I revealed the 3 components that are necessary for an extraordinary learning strategy. The first one was aligning with the business. The second one was the strategy needs to be led by a highly skilled learning and development team. And the third one was it needs to be implemented with the right content and the right programs in order to ensure that you've covered all bases and you have no gaps in your learning strategy. So this particular learning nugget is focused on the first component of the extraordinary learning strategy, which is aligning with the business. And I like to keep things simple. So when you're engaging executives and C-suite, have your seat at the table, you have to be prepared to engage them properly and not necessarily talking about learning and development jargon, and you don't get into, what we do on a day-to-day basis. You speak their language, you speak their jargon, you know what's important to them. One way to find out what's important to them is to ask them 3 questions. And yes, 3 questions is a great place to start, because once you start them talking, they will see you as a trusted advisor and see that you're really interested in helping them achieve the mission of the organization and not just promote your learning agenda. The first question is, what are your organization's top 3 business challenges? Limit it to 3, because those are the things that are really going to make an impact. Those are the things that are on their minds and that they want to talk about. So ask them about those challenges and then provide solutions to those challenges. The second question is, what tasks and activities are your employees having difficulty performing? That will lead to a conversation about specific things that employees are not able to do and help you develop a strategy that closes their knowledge and skill gaps. That's really important, because you don't want to provide a learning strategy that just talks about wishes, a wish list. You really need to have it focused on what the needs of the employees are and the needs of the organization. So that's what the second question does. And the third question is, if budgets were not a constraint, what would your organization need to perform at its best? We're looking for peak performance. So what would it take to get them there if they didn't have to worry about the budget? There are times throughout my career that I've heard, we don't have money for training, we don't have money to develop our employees, and I always, and I say always, delivered some learning strategies that were either no cost or low cost, because very rarely did I have a budget. So ask them to remove the barrier of the budget and just find out what do they think they need for their employees and their organization to be at peak performance. And then that will get them talking and thinking outside of just the constraints that they're experiencing, and give you ideas to how to create a viable, sustainable solution to help the organization meet its mission. Please subscribe to the Concerning Learning podcast.